Rightio, tonight we're going to be doing a dual shoe review of the 361 Degrees Centauri 3 and also the Eleos. This is their kind of up-tempo, kind of versatile daily trainer paired with the Max Cushion stable cruiser. I've been using a few of their other shoes as well, like the Meraki and the Ventus, all of them forming part of the 361 Degrees Australian range. These two I would say have been my favourite, so we're going to talk about these tonight, which could form part of a 2-for-1 deal as well, which we will chat about towards the end of the video. So right now, these two shoes, up-tempo daily trainer, versatile daily trainer, Max Cushion cruiser, we're going to run through them, give a bit of comparison and also chat through some kind of Western references as well, just so that you know exactly what you're getting, and hopefully we should be able to kind of explain what these two shoes could do for you and your rotation. Starting off with some specs here, as I said, more versatile daily trainer. We've got 38mm of foam in the heel, 10mm drop down to 28 in the forefoot. The foam that they're using here is their Engage midsole, which is a nice poppy nitrogen-infused TPU foam. You wouldn't know that it's beaded until you look on the bottom where some of the dust has kind of got in between the beads. It's got a similar level of energy return, maybe even a bit more than something like a Power on PB, maybe a little bit more compression, a bit more tuned towards daily training, but it's a nice light, airy, kind of punchy foam. 260 grams in my men's size 10 means that it's in and around that Nova Blast 5 zone as well. In terms of the Eleos, we've got a bigger platform here, really wide base, one of the widest, kind of broadest midsole bases that I've seen. Stack height wise though, we're looking at 37mm of foam in the heel with a 6mm drop. So it is technically lower stacked than the Centauri 3, but up in the forefoot you do have extra stack getting up with that 6mm drop. The foam that they're using here is their Primo compound, which is very excitingly a supercritical PEBA foam, which is very light, very airy. It's got a nice initial squish, but a really resilient pop back, which gives this shoe a lot more energy return than your standard kind of Max Cushion shoe. I would say from the start, both of these shoes don't look particularly exciting or kind of radical, but the midsole foams and the technologies that they are supporting are pretty impressive. 270 grams here as well, almost forgot to mention, so 10 gram weight gain on the Centauri 3, but still very much in that kind of versatile daily training weight zone. In terms of the uppers here, we're looking very, very similar, with maybe some slight differences being a bit of extra padding in the Eleos and just a bit of a roomier fit, just on merit of the midsole base being so much wider. I would say for both of them, we're looking at a semi-structured heel counter. It's not overly built up with plastic reinforcements. It's got a little bit of flex, but it is still well padded and does still provide a really nice controlled lockdown. Tongues are really nicely padded, gusseted on both sides for both of the shoes. The step-in feel for both of these is pretty fantastic, honestly, with the heel counter and tongue coming together, wrapping over the top of the foot really nicely. Really nice, comfortable feel. The upper material itself is this kind of double layer woven mesh, quite tight knit through most of the shoe with a few breathability holes up in the toe box for both of them. I would say the actual feel of the upper material is really nice. It's soft on foot, but my one critique so far is that it is a little bit warm as we head into the Australian summer. Not horribly, like you're not absolutely drenched in sweat by the end of the run, but I have just noticed with a darker color and a slightly thicker upper material, it doesn't breathe as well as some other performance trainers. I do think we could probably save a little bit of weight by going to a kind of single layer mesh, something a little bit lighter, but then there would be the trade-off in comfort. So I guess the kind of perfect upper would lie somewhere between this and your kind of fully stripped down upper. Right now, I think it's doing okay. In terms of the sizing and shape of these uppers, I would go true to size if you are consistent. So if you're always a size 10.5, go for a size 10.5. But if you float sizes like I do, I've managed to get away with a US 10, EU 44, which works with me for most 361 Degrees shoes. So if you float half sizes and you feel like you could have a bit of extra room ahead of the toes, maybe the half size down could be the way to go. I would encourage you, if you are in Perth, take a trip down to Subiaco and actually go in store to try these on. There's a 361 Degrees store on, can't remember the name of the street, but look it up. You should be able to go in and try the shoes on, which I think could be a big advantage, which we don't often get with a lot of these Chinese models. Overall, the uppers are pretty simple, straightforward, very, very similar between the two of them. They lock down nicely, they're very comfortable. Maybe a touch warm, but overall pretty happy so far. Moving down to the midsole and ride of both of these shoes, we've got two pretty different personalities going on here. The Centauri 3 is coming through as the more kind of punchy, up and about daily trainer. 10mm drop with a more traditional geometry, a bit of a flatter forefoot, does really encourage you to kind of punch into the foam, get up onto your toes and really enjoy the punch back from this nitrogen infused TPU. It's not the softest out there, but I think it has enough compression to not be harsh. But I think the kind of highlight for me is that really nice immediate direct rebound, which I think makes it pretty easy to kind of tick along into that kind of up-tempo daily training zone. It's very stable, there's no real crazy geometries going on here. I've got a good deal of surface area underfoot, but it never really felt clunky with just enough compression from the foam to kind of mellow out the landing. I did find landing a little bit further back in the heel, it did feel maybe a little bit disjointed. I definitely found getting up into the midfoot where you could kind of get a more solid focus compression of the entire midsole foam gave me a bit of a better response, but I don't think that heel strikers will have too much problem here. They will be getting a little bit of extra foam back there with the 10mm drop. If you're not a fan of 10mm drop shoes, this one probably won't change your mind, I will say that, but I have been pretty happy. It definitely doesn't feel as clunky as some shoes like a Nike Pegasus, or even the Vomero could feel a little bit clunky sometimes. The foam here definitely aids that kind of smooth beveling, helps it land a little bit smoother overall. For myself, I think the perfect run for this shoe is that kind of 40 minutes to an hour easy, probably leaning more 40 minutes, where I could kind of get rolling, pick up the pace a little bit, turn the legs over comfortably. I do think it is a shoe that I want to be fresh for. It's not the kind of leg saver, not the shoe that I'm looking for if the legs are a little bit trashed after a session. I'd probably lean more towards the Eleos there, but as that kind of day-to-day daily trainer, a little bit of pace to it, a little bit of versatility, been pretty happy with this one so far. In terms of the Eleos, as I said, probably leaning more towards this on my recovery days or days when the legs are a little bit more beaten up. The width of base here and the kind of level of comfort that you're getting is pretty incredible. I really enjoyed the fact that you got so much protection, so much cushion, but you can kind of still feel the ground. You don't feel too disconnected. You're not too high up. And the way that they've managed to do that is with such a wide midsole base here. I talked about this with the Mizuno Prototype Pure, the fact that that's gone down to 34mm. It doesn't really matter if you can kind of spread the foam out and give yourself a little bit more of a base to compress down. This is kind of taking that to the maximum, where you have such a wide base that even though you're kind of focusing your kind of compression in the middle, the rest of that midsole foam, even though it is outside of your base, is kind of contributing to that feeling of protection, that stability, that structure, and it is a very nice protective feel. Primo foam here is quite interesting. I do think it has a good level of kind of initial step-in softness, but on the run it does firm up the more pace that you push into it, which I think is quite a nice feature. If you want to sit back on it and kind of tick the legs over, it does allow you to do that. It gives you a bit more sink in before it gives you a nice healthy pop back. But if you start to feel good and you want to turn the legs over just a little bit quicker, the Piba foam does have a bit of guts to go. I don't think it's quite as versatile as a Centauri 3. I do think just having a bit of a wider base might make it feel a little bit cumbersome compared to this, which is a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more snappy, but I do think it has enough pace to be considered your standard daily trainer as well. In terms of the stability here, I think we're looking pretty good with a very wide midsole base, which splays well beyond where you're actually going to be contacting the midsole. The foam is soft, but not too soft. It's got that kind of deep resilience once you get past the first couple of mil of compression. And as with the Centauri 3, we've just got a lot of surface area on foot, which I think is going to make them quite useful for a lot of people who are just chasing a more simple, straightforward max cushion shoe, which doesn't feel as big and bulky and doesn't feel too unstable with excess compression. Drawbacks for each of these shoes, trying to keep things balanced. I think that the Centauri 3 might come across as a bit firm for some people. I do think if you enjoy shoes like the Nike Pegasus Plus, the Puma Velocity, if you like the Hoka Mark 6, those kind of shoes which aren't quite maxing out that 40mm stack of foam, I think you'll find this to be plenty cushioned. But if you're someone who's always in a Mag Max or a Bondi or a Asics Nova Blast, you need something which is soft and squishy, this might not have you covered. And then for the Eleos, drawbacks, Maybe the lack of rock ring for some people. Again, it's a little bit more of a traditional geometry. I think it relies a little bit more on the compression of the foam to kind of bring you through and transition it. So if you're looking for that big, tall, rolling ride, again, this probably isn't it. But I do think that that gives these shoes a little bit more of a personality than just being a kind of rinse and repeat, copy paste, max cushion, rockered shoe, and your big, soft, squishy daily trainer. So definitely some drawbacks for some people, but you could spin that and make it a positive if you really wanted to. Pretty happy with how the midsole foams have performed here. Definitely a little bit more of a kind of traditional package in both of them. Both quite stable though, and I do think that they allowed the midsole foams to sing. The Nitro TPU especially has kind of been my favorite here. More engaging and poppy than I was expecting on paper. I reckon if this was released 2 years ago with a carbon plate, it would be considered a competitive racing shoe, but right now we're just being given a treat in a standard traditional daily trainer mold. So yeah, pretty happy with this one so far. In terms of the outsole, we have some pretty thick coverage of rubber up in the forefoot for both of them. They're using their Gecko Grip rubber, which is quite thick, quite a hard, firm rubber compound as well. The grip so far has been above average, maybe not quite as good as a Puma grip or an Adidas, what they call light traction CPU, but it does have pretty good purchase, especially in dry weather. Bit of dirt tracks, it's done well. Wet weather, maybe a little bit slippery here and there, but overall, I'm pretty happy. I do think it's above average from what you expect from most Western brands. In terms of durability, I expect it to be pretty good. We've got a pretty hard rubber compound here, and with the case that I've done in the Flame 4 as well, which I believe has a very similar rubber, I do expect that we're going to get some pretty good durability here. The exposed midsole foam, I think, should be noted if you're going to spend a lot of time on gravel. The Eleos, I do think, is at more risk of kind of puncturing or kind of ripping the midsole foam. I'm not too concerned about the TPU beaded foam. Notoriously durable in terms of resistance to scratching and tearing. Maybe it'll scuff up a bit quickly, but I do think it will hold on quite nicely. In terms of the price points of these shoes, these are available on the 361 Degrees Australia website, separate from the kind of stock that you'll see on taobao or aliexpress, so they're not really available in the same way. On their website, initially they were released for $302.70, which I do think was maybe a little bit much, especially considering the kind of fussy Australian consumer that they're trying to appeal to. For a long time, for a period of 4 or 5 months, they were discounted down consistently to $260 and $220, which is much more competitive. But I guess the kind of key thing here is that right now they are part of a 2-for-1 deal where you can pick up 2 shoes, any of their range, for the price of the more expensive model. So effectively you could take the price point down to about $150 each if you pair these 2 shoes together, or you could pair them with the Flame 4 and get them for around $180 each with a pretty fantastic mechanical racing shoe. In terms of the value, obviously, I don't need to tell you that going for a 2-for-1 deal is going to increase the value that you get. But if we're going to chat about their kind of more standard discounted price, $260 and $220, I do think they're offering pretty good value there as well. For $260, you're getting a Nimbus competitor, Triumph 23, Clifton kind of zone. I do think it's doing really well there with a more advanced midsole foam than a lot of them. A little bit more punchback, lighter weight, and a really nice, fun ride underfoot. I do think it's doing well in that zone, max cushion, but not super bulky. I do think it's going to be pretty competitive if people can just try it out and give it a chance. For the Centauri 3 at $220, $230, it is a little bit of a different model. A lot of the kind of daily trainers these days are getting really soft and tall and cushioned. This is a bit more traditional, but with the upgraded midsole foam, it's kind of sitting alone in that category, maybe with the Velocity Nitro 4. You could argue the Ride 18, but I think this feels a lot better than the Saucony Ride 18. Pegasus 41, this dunks all over that, much better shoe. So I think it's doing pretty nicely there. I don't think it's quite competing with the Evo SL, or I guess for some people, Nova Blast 5 is still going to be softer and more comfy than this one. But for me, as someone who likes a little bit more of a kind of snappy, engaging daily trainer, big fan of the Velocity Nitro 4, this is the kind of shoe which I can get around and would probably choose over some of those more soft, compressive models. So $220 there for a decent midsole foam, again, I think is pretty good. Getting into a few comparisons just to round things out, let you know where they sit I'll run through the Eleos first. I think the more similar shoes that I've come across are the Triumph 23. So the midsole foam there is a beaded Power Run PB, a little bit softer and more compressive, not as much bounce back compared to the Eleos, which I think is a little bit more direct in its response. Maybe you don't get quite as much compression, but the kind of pop back and energy return I do think makes up for it. This is definitely a little bit more stable with the kind of stiffer midsole foam, broader base, and a little bit of a lower stack height. That does make a difference there. 10mm drop on the Triumph, I do think gives it a little bit more of a flat feeling in the forefoot, whereas the 6mm drop here does give it a little bit more guts, which I have appreciated. The other one I was thinking about was the Topo Athletic Spectre 2, which I think is quite similar in terms of the foam density with a beaded P-backs there, a little bit snappy, a little bit punchier, lower drop as well, 5mm drop versus 6mm. Key difference is the width of base. This does have your force kind of distributed a little bit wider, and it does feel a little bit bigger underfoot compared to the Spectre 2, where I could turn over, pick up the pace a little bit easier, which makes sense. The Spectre 2 is meant to be a versatile all-rounder. This is that kind of more comfortable cruiser, but there is a bit of similarities there. If you like the vibe of the Spectre 2, you might get along with the Eleos as well. For the Centauri 3, I think key competitors, we would be looking at something like the Aeroglide 3 from Salomon. I think this is a little bit firmer, a little bit more direct, a little bit more punchy in the TPU foam, whereas the Salomon definitely feels a little bit more plush and compressive, a little bit more friendly maybe to some people, but it does feel a bit bigger as well. The 40mm stack feels a lot more noticeable than the 38 here. I do think that comes down to the 10mm drop, which I do think makes the forefoot feel a bit more grounded. You feel a little bit more in control of the shoe compared to the Aeroglide, which I think can be a little bit unstable, maybe a bit compressive, twists around a little bit. This is a bit more direct. The Velocity Nitro 4 is worth a mention for the Centauri 3 as well. Also having a more traditional geometry with an upgraded midsole foam, the aliphatic TPU. It's a bit more flexible, a bit more nippy, maybe a little bit more connected to the ground. This is good, but it's not quite as close. I do think it has a bit more protection, a bit more structure to it. Definitely more stable, but the Velocity Nitro 4 does feel a bit more nippy and versatile, which could appeal to some. 180 bucks on the Velocity Nitro 4 is pretty tough to beat. I think if you could get this as part of the 2-for-1 deal for essentially 150 bucks, this would be where I would lean towards this one. Otherwise, Velocity Nitro 4 is pretty tough to beat. So yeah, bringing that all together, these two shoes from 361 Degrees have been really fun. I've actually been surprised by how much I've enjoyed both of these shoes. They don't look super techy or performance based on the surface, but with some nice simple geometries, foams which I think speak for themselves, they've come together to offer a ride which is truly modern, truly up to date, and I think doing a lot to kind of compete against these Western brands. Great price points if you can pick them up as part of the 2-for-1 deal. Encourage you to get around that one, especially if you're in Perth. Head down, try some shoes on, see what you reckon. I think there is some really nice value to be had. Good stuff from 361 Degrees, simple, effective performance right here. I think a lot of people enjoy them if they can give them a chance.